Annie and everyone. So today we're going to talk about B form, and this is lesson 9. And that might sound kind of weird. B form, what is that? But to be honest, I love this form, and once I explain it, it's going to make sense, and it is so much fun. I'm also a grammar language nerd, so maybe I'm alone in that. But let's see here. I'll pull up our lesson, and I think once I explain it, it will make total sense, and I hope that it does. Again, let me know if you have questions. And how do I do this? Okay. So here we are. This is our lesson 9, B form. Again, we're still working with VAI verbs. And, you may have heard me mention A form before. A form is like a simple sentence. In A form and B form, there's also C form, exist for all of the verb types. So once we get through explaining this, it applies to all the verb types. It's just there might be different ways of conjugating them. And that might seem overwhelming when you're looking at your paradigms list, like, oh my goodness, not that one. I have to memorize all of this, but they follow such a consistent pattern that once you do become familiar and you're like really pushing yourself to use these every day, next thing you know, they're just going to come like that. I mean, if you think of the irregularity of how English conjugates goose, geese, knife, knives, and I'm trying to think of another example that I just stumbled across earlier today where it was I can't think of it. Either way, English is totally out there and doesn't agree anywhere, but Ojibwe always does. There are very few exceptions, and just trust the patterns. That's I love the consistency in this language and the agreement with everything. So anyway, now that I'm done gushing, let's talk about B form. In your VAI paradigms up here, the ones that I mention all the time, and highly recommend you familiarize yourself with, because these are the secret to knowing how to use the verbs and everything, most everything in the Ojibwe language. You have to know how to conjugate. That allows you to make use of all the words. I think you may have heard us mention that English is 80% nouns. And so that's why when people approach trying to learn Ojibwe, they want to approach it as, well, let's learn colors and let's learn animals and let's start learning the names of things. But you can't get hardly anywhere in Ojibwe doing that. You need to start with verbs, and eventually you'll just start gathering like nouns here and there and adding them to your basket. But Ojibwe is 80% verbs and only 20% nouns. And sometimes the nouns, since they're animate or inanimate, not sometimes, the nouns, because they are inanimate or animate, will determine which verbs you use them with. So the verbs are so central and important to expressing most anything in the language that you have to start here. And so starting with these paradigms, they will give you the functionality. And what we are trying to do is give you enough of a basis, enough of a foundation that you can continue to grow your own understanding of the language on your own. We want to give you the basic functionality. And once you understand those really important basics, you'll be able to keep extending your language and applying new things using these patterns that are so consistent. All right, so here we go. VAI paradigms, verb, animate, intransitive. There is an animate being doing an action, but there is no one receiving the action. There is no transfer of action from the person doing the action to another object or another being. So again, my favorite example, someone, he or she is eating, but we don't know what they're eating. We just know that that is what they are doing. All right, so this, you may have noticed, we have A form positive and A form negative. When you look at these verbs, you will see the translation here creates an entire sentence on its own. Gawin ni bawisi, I am not standing. You could put a period at the end of that and have it make complete sense to a listener. But if you scroll down, you have B form. These are for verbs that end in short vowels. So we're using ni bawe again. B form refers to, well, let's look at the translation here. For I or me, nin, ni bawiyan, and you see that the pronoun is now attached to the end of the verb, and that is consistent for all of the pronouns. There's nothing in front. That's a defining characteristic of B form is you can always recognize it because the person is always tacked on to the end. But if I explain the meaning of nibaoyan, you have this ellipsis with when I am standing. If I were to walk up to you and just say when I am standing, you'd be sitting there like, okay, but where's the rest of the sentence? Like, what are you saying? That is exactly what B form is. B form is a dependent form or a dependent clause, which is a terminology you might be familiar with from English. It, at its basic, usually is a sentence that starts with when, as, or if. If, so this phrase here, ni bawian, could be translated as I am standing, if I am standing, but it doesn't always have those words in front of it. That's just to get the idea across that it is not a complete thought on its own. So, all right, I'm so excited. I love this. Definitely get yourself familiar with these. So you may have heard yan or yun or yin. Those might sound familiar. And then in our Gawin form, unlike A form, the word gawin is not needed because it's just a clause. It's just a sentence fragment, more or less. So gawin isn't in the sentence, but we still have a hint of that C in there, that negating phoneme, that little sound part. So nibawe siwan, that instead of yan, it's wan, and that's more or less when I am not standing. The C all through all of these, nibawe siwan, nibawe sik, nibawe siwong, nibawe siwong, wong, wong, nibawe siweg, nibawe sigwa, nibawe snig. That s sound in there, that is what makes it not happen. All right, so again, keep your handy verb paradigms, VAI paradigms close by you, and we're going to jump it over here. Also, I'm probably going to be back to using my old-fashioned whiteboard here because, yeah, really, I just need a stylus or something for the Zoom whiteboard. I don't like using my mouse pad. That just doesn't work. So I already kind of expressed this, but for review, in Ojibwe, we have A form and B form. The phrasing refers to compound sentences where there is an independent clause, which is A form, and a dependent clause, which is B form. So I hope you're recalling your fun grammar and composition classes from middle and high school. Those were so great, weren't they? I loved them. That was my favorite subject. Does anyone remember sentence diagramming? Because I did that, and my mom could not make heads or tails of what I was doing, and I was just sitting there like, we underline this one because it's the action verb, and this one because it's the pronoun, and this is the direct object, and like it was turning a sentence into pictures, and I loved that. I'm very visual with words. That's why I just like I've heard from many of you, I need to see the word in Ojibwe so I can use it, even though a lot of people say, oh, it's a spoken language, so it shouldn't be written. So many of us were trained to learn that way. And I also think that, depending on various factors, some people are just more predisposed to being visual learners. Whether you learn or whether you were conditioned to learn visually or not, there's still an aspect of us that has that a certain predisposition towards learning styles. Anyway, tangent. So as a quick refresher, in English, in an independent clause can stand alone as a sentence, and it doesn't need anything else to make sense. So he was eating. The above is an example of a simple sentence formed entirely of an independent clause. In Ojibwe, to say he was eating, gi wisine, we have the time tense gi for the was or the past factor, and wisine, he is eating. So gi wisine, he was eating. You can put a period after that. It would make perfect sense on its own. He was eating. But then we change it a little bit. He was eating, that is a complete sentence, but if you pair it with another clause, then it's an independent clause. It's a complete thought, which is why it's considered independent. He was eating while watching TV. So again, after this red text here, you could put a period and call it good. He was eating. But while watching TV, period. That doesn't make sense on its own. It is dependent on he was eating for while watching TV to make sense. The above is a compound sentence composed of an independent clause in red and a dependent clause, which is underlined. I just said that you could put a period after the red clause, it would make sense, but the underlined portion would lose meaning while watching TV. The above clause makes no sense. If someone walked up to you and just said, while watching TV, you're waiting for the rest of that thought there. So yeah, you can also have two independent clauses in an English sentence. He was eating and he was watching TV. If you remove the word and you just put a period after he was eating, you get two dependent simple sentences. He was eating, he was watching TV. Pretty basic English. And if you just stick to a form in Ojibwe, that's kind of what you would sound like in the language. He was eating, he was watching TV. When really you could add that coordinating conjunctions and get a compound sentence and sound all smart and stuff. Or just sound a little more complex in how you're talking. He was eating and he was watching TV. So again, you would have two simple sentences, both with meaning. They are not dependent on each other for any meaning. In Ojibwe, we have this often. B form dependent clauses are likely even more frequently used in natural conversation than A form clauses. You most likely, if you were to listen to conversation in Ojibwe, the majority of the conversation that you'd hear would be composed of B form clauses, or be composed of those dependent clauses. And it took me a while of familiarizing myself with the language and practicing to really understand why. And for the most part, it is transferable, I guess, the idea of the independent and dependent clause in a compound sentences in English over to the Ojibwe application of A form and B form, though I do catch myself sometimes, rarely, noticing that B form is used in Ojibwe when I would have thought to use A form, but I'm not fluent. I'm still learning. I still make mistakes, and no one not even someone who is fluent or someone who grew up speaking any language is going to be 100% grammatically correct every moment of every day. We make mistakes speaking English all the time. I've probably made plenty of mistakes just talking right now. Um, and you can't hold yourself to the standard of having perfect grammar all the time and never messing up. That is a state of perfection that no one can really achieve. You can strive to do the best that you can and remember all the grammar, and eventually it starts flowing easily and naturally. But in the very beginning, when you're first learning, don't be afraid to practice speaking just because you might make a grammar mistake. Like, that's okay. And we all make mistakes and we're all learners. And I would rather meet someone who is trying to use the language and making mistakes all the time than someone I guess I would rather try and help someone who came up to me trying to speak English, doing so in a really broken way, than someone who refuses to talk to me at all because they're embarrassed about their English. Like, granted, I am super shy about actually using the language, the Ojibwe, with anyone who is a better speaker than me because I get so anxious, and that's natural, I think. But I have a friend who, he would just go out there and pull out his Ojibwe and use it as much as possible, and he might make 10 mistakes in a 10-second blathering of language, but he was staying in the language, and that was what was important, because over time, as we grow more familiar, those mistakes become fewer and fewer. And as long as you're conveying meaning, for the most part, you just want to start out with, am I getting the idea across? So anyway, I just a little pep talk to encourage you guys. Clearly, I have had caffeine. Can you tell? Anyway, so he was eating and he was watching TV. We already went over that. In Ojibwe, we have this often. B form is usually more frequent. So are you familiar with the question, what's your name, or how are you called? Anin Nikazian. That technically translates to how are you called, but we translate it in English a lot of times to what's your name. We have been learning about VAI verbs and how to tell the person markers. For example, nin, I or me, is indicated by some form of ne preceding the verb, and gin, or you singular, is indicated by some form of ge preceding the verb. But in the question, anin nikazayan, what's your name, or how are you called? You, where is you? We don't see any form of gin indicated by ge or gid in the sentence. So where is it? Let's look at our VAI paradigms. Ijinikazo. It looks like this. Ijinikazo. He or she is called a certain way. That's the root verb. We'll go, and it ends with O, which is a short vowel in Ojibwe. And here we are, we're at this is Gawain forms. We'll go up to our B form positive short vowel endings, which is I or O. And we're going to look for yan. Ijinikazo yan. Again, even though I spelled it with an I, there's a reason the I is now an E. We'll go over that in a second, but it's not important. I'll just explain it because I hate not knowing a thing. And there are probably other people out there like me. So, Ijinikazo yan. Look for something with yan on the end. Yan, that's me. Yan, right here, Y-A-N, or the A-N technically. That is the gin this time. It's not signified by git or gid in front of the word. It is tacked on to the end. The suffix yun or un, because sometimes that Y changes to a different letter, is what indicates gin or you singular. So before we get ahead, let's break down the sentence. Anin Ijinikazian, anin, what or how. Asian is your name, or in this case, it's not going to be is your name. In this case, technically, it is the way that you are called. Ijinakazo, she or he is called a certain thing. That's our root verb, the form we'd find in the dictionary. So this sentence is actually in C form, but it's similar enough to B form that I wanted to show you because it's familiar. You don't have to worry about C form right now. We're actually going to cover that pretty soon, and it's kind of fun. C form causes the beginning of the word to have something called initial vowel change. There is a list of like what sound each vowel turns into, so you will, and it always sticks to that same list, so you'll always know. And when you have that memorized, it's easy. So I in C form becomes E, Asianikazo, and the rest of the word receives a B form ending. So instead of just Ijinakazo yen with the I'll show you. Ijinakazo yen. That would mean when, as, or if he or she, or when, as, or if you are called a certain way. But when you put this E on the front, Ijinakazo yen, that is a dependent clause with the meaning of with anin in front, with our question marker, B form introducer, the thing that introduces that form that a dependent clause always has to follow, anin. Asianikazo yen, how is it that you are called? So it's asking about it almost is as if what you are called is an item. That's kind of how I think about it. It is also called participle form or participle form. I don't remember the term. But I'm going off on a tangent again. It's not really that important at the moment. I just really wanted you guys to see that in this familiar phrase, Anination yen is what refers to you, because the ending of the word uses a B form ending, a dependent clause ending. So if you have a clause that depends on something else for meaning, it will be in B form, sometimes in C form, but in this case, for this lesson, B form. In B form, the persons are on the end of the word rather than in the front, and rather than sandwiching the verb if you're talking about plural persons in A form. So end of the word, always end of the word for B form and C form. So if you look at your paradigms document, look at all the pages that say B form on the top, and you'll notice that for every Gin paradigm, the verb will end with yun, one, or un, these right here. And those refer to Gin or you. So let's first start identifying B form. B form is when the sentence clause needs to begin with when, as, or if. B form is used with other words that trigger B form, such as the phrase in order for, while, any of the A questions. We call them A questions because they start with the letter A, which is pretty straightforward. Ani and anish, awenen, aweganen, anindi, aninapi. Well, kind of. Underline the dependent clause in the sentence. So when you get ready to leave, you put on your shoes. So you have to ask which part of this sentence makes sense on its own. When you get ready to leave. Imagine walking up to someone and just saying that. They're probably still waiting for the rest of the sentence. So like, you put on your shoes. That's a sentence on its own. You put on your shoes. That one, you could capitalize the letter Y and call it good. But this one, when you get ready to leave, that has like that ... at the end of it. That one is dependent on this other clause over here for it to have meaning. So I underlined when you get ready to leave as the B form sentence. If someone called you and just said, when you get ready to leave, you'd be waiting for the rest of it. So in Ojibwe, this sentence is Animajayan Gibabichi. Hey, it's a lot shorter in Ojibwe. Ane is that time tense here, kind of means in the process of, as you are getting ready to do something. Like I could say in Dunne Bokade, I am becoming hungry. In Dunne Maja, I am on my way to leaving. I am in the process of leaving. So Ane Maja, I am, let's see, Maja, that means he or she is leaving. And that is the root form as you would find it in the dictionary, Maja. So we tack on yun, right, which comes from over here. Maja ends in a long vowel. So we'll just go over to our long vowel endings here. E, U, A, and E. So Maja ends with A. So it would be Majayan when I leave, Majayan when you leave. When you leave, Majayan. That's why we used B form here. And then Ge Babichi. The word Babichi in its root form means he or she is putting on his shoes. That almost sounds like there's a transfer of action in there, but the shoes receiving the action is actually built into the verb. There are a few VAIs that exist like that, and they act just like they're basically they're VAIs, or VAI plus object. I'm not going to get into that at the moment. Ge babichi. Ge is gin. In A form, in an independent clause, I could just walk up to one of my kindergartners, see that he is putting on his shoes, and go, "Oh, ge babichi." And he'd be like, "Huh? Ge babichi. That's what you're doing right now. You're putting on your shoes. Ge babichi." So, animajayan ge babichi. When you get ready to leave, put on your shoes. Though, you know what? I'm gonna make a slight change here. You should, because otherwise it almost sounds like command form, and I don't want to get that messed up. So the should, would, or could tense is da. It attaches to the person. So you, the pronoun plus the time tense da. When you get ready to leave, you should get da babichi, put on your shoes. So when I am talking to one of my kindergartners who is not listening and the rest of them are out in the hallway putting on their shoes, I could just go up to him and say, "Hey, geda babichi, you should put your shoes on. Geda babichi." So yeah, we already did this. Ane majayan geda babichi. So underline the part of the word that refers to gin in the B form clause. Yun. And you can tell that by looking at you, gin, and the red, yun. And you can underline the Y-A-N, or you can underline the A-N. And then let's see. Jaba. In this next sentence, underline the part of the words that refer to gin in both A form and B form. So that means this is an exercise that I did when I was in class. I really liked it. So more or less, you're just looking at the sentence and going, how do I recognize gin? Where is gin? So jibwawi snian, giwi was a sinagane. Let's start with what's familiar. Do you see any form of gin in terms of ge or gid in this sentence? Yeah, right here, ge. The we is a future will desirative, will or want to tense. It's not like you will do this no matter what. That's the g or da tense called, I think, definitive. This one is the will or want to. It's just kind of tentative future. Giwi ozisinagane, you'll set the table. So if that one's gin in A form, giwi is a sinagane, you'll set the table. That one makes sense on its own as an independent thought, independent sentence. Dubois wisinian. Dubois means before. Wisine, we know that word. On its own, in root form, it means he or she is eating. So if that's the root word, then the part that's left over is yun. And we can go back to our paradigms, go, oh, there is yun. And if you want to get all technical about it, which I highly recommend, go to your short vowel endings, because wisine ends in I, which is short vowel. Look for yun, and again, we're talking about gin, so there you go. You can just verify it that way. Yun is gin, and sometimes, like in this kind of thing, when I'm practicing, I will say I write it out on here. See it. Jibois. We yan. Kita what I would do is I would go, okay, which one is gin? I recognize ge here in A form, and yun here in B form, and I would connect the two like that, so I could always remember which is which. Because I'm a visual learner, this helps me a lot. So let's go back to our screen share here. Great. And then it's just asking which phrase or clause is A form, which one is B form. So how can you tell? Dubois wisnian is B form. It means before you eat. This is an incomplete sentence on its own. And even if you didn't know the English translation, you could tell that it's B form because you recognize the person is tacked onto the end. That's the B form paradigm for gin. And then giwios is sinagane. This sentence is A form. It means you will set the table, and it's a complete thought on its own. And even if you didn't know the English translation of it, you can also tell that it is A form because the form of gin used in the prefix ge right here is an A form paradigm. So you could figure out what whole sentence, whether whole sentences are composed of A form or B form just by using your VAI paradigm sheet and like finding those bits and pieces, those phonemes of words. Or I guess maybe that would be considered a morpheme. Anyway, let's see. So take note that in all of the VAI paradigms, that in the VAI paradigms document, how verbs end and how that changes the letters and sounds of the pronouns in B form. So you want to look at the text in the red. For example, if the verb ends in a vowel such as ikido, she or he says, the pronoun suffix is like kidoyan, yun, kidod, ikido young, kido yeg, kido wad. And that will be consistent for every verb that ends in a short vowel, but also in a long vowel. B form is pretty steady that way. But if the verb ends in an M, like bizindum, he or she is listening, there's no Y, no letter Y. And you want to note the difference in the third person ween. So ween rather than ikidod with a D, since it ends in M, we can't really stick a D on biz and dum. So what happens is the M turned into an N, and now the third person is the ween is indicated by the G. So biz and dung. It's just a new concept to familiarize yourself with, but it's consistent as well with all verbs that end in M, and also with verbs that end in N. The he or she is indicated by a G rather than a D. So here we can tell that I is the on, is in the mon, instead of yan, it's just the AAN. Is in the mun, un is still present, just like in yun, but it's un. Is in dung, that M turned to N, and then the he or she is indicated by this G right here, bis and dung. If we, but not you, so exclusively, like if we, oops, I need to, made some typos here, I apologize, listen. If we, but not you say, or I mean, if we, but not you listen. And remember in the A form, the way you could tell that you was not included was because there was no ge indicating gin to be found anywhere in the sentence. The same idea applies here. You is a single an. This is present. This is not, well, I guess it's more like an, referring to me, is present there. So I'm talking about me, us, but not you over there. But if we all, including you, listen, gin is there. Gin is there. We just add the additional ung, so bizindamung. And that's how I remember it. If it's elongated, I'm talking about me and some others over here on my side, but not you. Sorry for pointing. And if it's shortened, bizindamung, I am talking about all of us, including you, because bizindamun. You listen, bizindamung. You, including us including you, are listening. Anyway, again, just familiarization practice. Bizindameg instead of yeg, it's meg. If yous all listen, bizindamawad, ikidowad. So in this one, it's like instead of saying bizindamwad, we add an O in there just to make it easier to say. Like ikidowad, bizindam, we add that O, owad, to make it if they listen. And then if the verb ends in N, bungishin, he or she falls. Again, there is no Y, and ween is different. Bungishin, and then we add that G, bungishing, if he or she falls, ween. So bungishin on, just like in bizindum mon over here. If I listen, if I fall, bungishin nun, if you listen, or if you fall, bizindum mun, if you listen, it's that an. Then we have the ong for if we, but not you fall, because there's that elongated A in I, and elongated A in the us, but not you. Whereas like if you fall, that's the shortened A. If we all, including you, fall, you've got the shortened A again. It's got that agreement there. And then bungishineg, if yous all fall, and bungishin noad, the root word bungishin, we add O to link on that winawa suffix wad to refer to if they fall. So using the VAI paradigm document here, you're going to, and the verb bank below, so I've got a verb bank here that tells you what the root verb is and the translation here. You're going to translate the following. So these are all V form. as he was eating, when I arrive, if I set the table. So we snid. And the way I figure that out, so as he was eating, I go down there, I look for something about eating. He or she eats. They can also be he or she is eating. The root form is we snit. That's already a word or a independent sentence on its own, but we need to be talking about him or her, we snit, in a dependent clause. So we'll go over to our VAI paradigms, short vowel endings like we snit. Look for ween, he or she. Ween, we go over there. So just substitute in the verb. We snit, and we get d. We snid. And that's why it's we snid. And if you wanted to get all fancy, you could add in who is doing that action in terms of the paradigm. So in English, we know it's he, but in Ojibwe, it's ween. And that's up to you. So if you're when I arrive, Dougal shin. Let's go down to our word bank, looks for arrive, he or she arrives. Our word is Dougal shin. That is the root word, how it's found in the dictionary. Dougal shin, but we're talking about me, and it ends in an N. So let's go over to our document here and scroll down until we find verbs that end in N. M ending, nope. Here we go, N endings, but that's A form. A form. Here we are, B form positive. So we want to use Dugoshin when we're talking about I or me. When I arrive, so let's substitute. It's as if we're substituting Dugoshin in here. Dugoshin. Oh, look, all we have to do is add on to the end. So what I would do is I would type in Dugoshinan. And then who are we talking about? Which is the pronoun? In English, it's I or me. And in Ojibwe, it would be nin, N-I-I-N, nin. And then if I set the table, so this one is interesting. Osisnagane, and we're talking about me, I, again, and it's a long vowel ending. Osisnagane is your verb. He or she sets the table. Go to our paradigm document, go up to long vowel endings, and osisnagane, and then we just tack on yan to the end of it, and that's what we did here. If I set the table, that could also be understood as when I set the table or as I set the table. So if you really wanted to emphasize the word if I do it, you can add the word gishpin. Gishpin translates to if. Osisnagane yan. Both of those would be correct. You want to use gishpin only if you are emphasizing the word if in the sentence. And who's doing it? That is nin. So let's try it with this one. When he writes. Complete sentence, complete thought, going. A form is a complete thought. We need B form. When he writes, it's the dependent. So it's for he or she writes right there, here. O should be ige. O should be ige. He or she writes, he or she is writing. So O should be ige. We're going to start by just typing in. And when you do this, make a copy of the document by going to File, make a copy, and that's the one that you can edit. So let's see here. O should be ige. We're talking about he or she, which right here, he or she writes. That's an A form, full complete thought. We need when, as, or if. When he writes, we need it to be B form. So we're going to go over here. We're already on our B form positive long vowel ending. So O should be ige. We need to find when he. So we'll look over here. Here it is. It's I or me, you, he or she. That is ween. And so if you were to substitute that word in black for oje, be ige, the red is how you add on ween or he. So it's just indicated by D. So it should be gay. There we go. When he or she writes. Get all fancy and add an ellipsis. So like, who are we talking about? We're talking about ween, just he or she. There was something else. Oh yeah, in the paradigms document, please don't be substituting verbs in this master document. If you would like to try that on your own as a learning tool, please make sure to make a copy. All right, and then I will let you guys have fun with the rest of these on your own. There is an answer key at the end of the document, so give it a shot and then scroll to the very end, all the way down here, and it's going to be answer key part 1. I don't know why that says 11. Anyway, and just real quick, we already did that. We're going to look at the negated forms. So these are like the B form Gowing statements. I say a lot. Let's see. So again, you're going to need your paradigm document. Now we're going to look at the Gowing form for B form. As a refresher, our time tenses is person plus time tense dash verb. Nin, or some form of nin, which is in front of a G, it's nin. So it's ningi. Some people say ingi. Both are correct. Ningi ozisinagane. I did set the table, or I already set the table. Ingi. That gi is the time tense. So gi is past tense, indicated by that highlight. We is the will or want to tense, future, also sometimes called future desirative. I am planning to do my homework. I will do my homework, but then I got really tired and I didn't do my homework. Whereas if you use the g or duh tense, that's future definite tense, you'd better do it because you don't want to be caught lying. So g or duh, and I'll explain that g or duh. I think I explained it in a previous video. I'll go over it again. And then da, which is different than duh. Da is the should, would, could tense. And that's context. So nui ozisinagane. I want to set the table. Could also translate as I will set the table. Ninga or inga. The nin is the personal pronoun. The ni is the personal pronoun indicating nin. Inga ozisinagane. I will definitely is implied that I will set the table. Note that this tense is ga when preceded by a pronoun. So if that person is in front of it, we use ga. But if we are talking about he or she, ween, the person's already built into the verb. So remember that ozisinagane, he or she is setting the table. When there's nothing preceding it, it's not ga anymore. It is da, as here. So da ozisinagane, he, person's already in the verb, will definitely implied. He will definitely set the table. Note, in B form, this ga, da tense is always ge. So it changes again. And then gishpin, ge ozisinagane yen. Gishpin, that's that if word. If. Ge, for sure, definitely, will ozisinagane set the table. How do we tell who's doing it? Well, you see a yan there at the end. We could look at our paradigms real quick. Yan refers to I or me, which is neat. So if I for sure set the table, I'd better get dessert. Or I'd better not have to do the dishes if I set the table. that's kind of how those work. And then gda uzisnagane, you should set the table. Ge is gin, the da is that should, would, could tense. And all right, now that we reviewed the time tenses, let's look at gawin statements. So gawin in A form, gawin plus verb, or sorry, gawin, verb plus C or Z, some form of C. Gawin and C work together to make the verb not happen. We went over this in a different video, which is in the lessons, and not there. I don't know what it is. Come on. My tabs. Okay. Oh, I linked it right here. The negation video is right here if you want a refresher. Gawin and C work together to make the verb not happen. So gawin, gi osinagane C. So gawin works with C to make osinagane not happen. No, he did. There's their gi time tense. He, no personal pronoun is added. So we know we're talking about him or her because they're built into the verb. Gawin gi osinagane C. No, he did not set the table. In independent clauses, simple sentences, or A-form sentences, gawin is required to start the sentence. For a verb to be negated in this form, both the gawin and the C have to be present. But in B form, gawin's not necessary, only the C or some form of C is necessary. So recall from the negation video that the C is greedy and it wants to be right there next to the verb, like gewisinesimen or gewisinisim, like that min on the end, and the ge, that's like we all are not eating, or gewisinisim, yous are not eating. That C shimmies in there next to wisine, and then we tack the plural person onto the end. Let's see, in B form, since all of the pronouns are tacked onto the end of the verbs, to negate them, the C or si has to attach to the verb before the pronoun is added onto the end, and I'll show you what I mean. Gishpin, if we ozisinagane yun, if you are going to set the table. Yun, you. Gishpin we ozisinagane C one, if you are not going to set the table. So our C is actually shortened, it's just sit, but that W kind of makes that I sound longer, so C1. Instead of Y, we have W. So let's look at our paradigms just so this isn't super confusing, because that'll lay it all out. But what's important to note here is the not, the negation comes after the verb, it attaches right to the verb before the person is tacked on. So we'll go over here. This is snagane, ends with a E. This is B form negative, gawin form, and we're talking about you, singular gin. So ozisinagane, we'll change that here, ozisinagane, and we've got our C1 there, the C1, that's like the paradigm for you aren't doing something when you are not setting the table. There we go. So it's the C1, and the one is technically the U, the gin, and the C is the thing that makes it not happen. The action doesn't happen, and it wants to be right next to the action that it's negating. Because it's not negating the person, it's negating the action. All right, so in the B form negative, the C is just si, and the yan becomes one, or yun becomes one. And that's, if you look at all of these, it's C1, C1. Instead of D, we've got sig, so siwang, siwang. siweg, sigwa, snik. So we have some differences here. And I think I say it over here in the document, like there's really no simple memorization rule. They do all stick to their patterns, which is nice. You're not having to memorize 100 different rules. They're the same repeated patterns, but they're a little different than like their positive counterpart. So like something I did was I printed them out on index size cards and I stuck them on a keychain that I would wear with me. And I have them labeled really good. Like this one is A form positive, big red Sharpie marker on the top. And it helped tremendously when I was working briefly at an immersion school or whenever I needed to be using that language and like, oh gosh, how do I say when he didn't wash his hands? Oh gosh, I could pull it up and be like, okay, B form negative. I know the word for washing hands because you begin in G. That ends with a long vowel. Okay, B form negative right here. It's sig. That's what I need, sig, to add on that. So like I'd keep the ones with me that I needed to reference most. I tended to need the negatives in the B form because I don't use them very often. But doing that and making yourself, setting a goal and making yourself use them as much as possible, that is what's going to get it flowing in the brain. So B form negations also follow the same triggers that A form negations do. So remember in A form we had like if the verb ended in an N instead of a C, it would be a Z, like Bungishin Z, Gawin Bungishin Z. No, he is not falling. Gawin Gi Bungishin Z. No, he didn't fall. Or if the verb ends in an M, bizindum, he or she is listening. Gawin bizindunzi. The M changes to an N, and the N triggers the C to turn to a Z sound. Same thing happens in B form. That's consistent, and that's just that easier to say rule. So like Bungishin, he or she falls, Gishpin, Bungishinan. If I fall, Gishpin, Bungishin, Z, Wan. If I don't fall. And here we go. Use your document, try to translate these. Also note that the pronoun is like which pronoun is doing the action. So neen, geen, ween. See number 1 for an example. And again, we've got an answer key at the end, and this is going to be answer key number 2 or part 2. B form alone signifies the idea of when, as, or if, but if you really want to emphasize the word if or the idea of if, you can add the word gishpin. So I have it in Ojibwe here, along with the root verb. Ojibwe, he or she writes. Gishpin, Ojibwe siwan. Well, we know that Ojibwe right here is he or she writes. And we know that C is a negative and it's clearly in B form. So let's go over to, it ends in a long vowel. So let's go to our VAI paradigms that end in long vowels. There it is, ends in E. It is negative B form where we should be. So we want to find one that looks like Siwan. Siwan. That's Siwan. Siwan right there. So who's doing it? Gin, you. So if, Yishpin, if you aren't writing, because there's no time tense, so it's present. If there's no time tense indicated, it is automatically present tense. And then B, who is doing it? Which pronoun? Gin, Siwan. And that's indicated here. Gin, Siwan, Gin, and that's you, singular. And then here, I do want to bring up Gi bimibatusik. Gi bimibatusik. The root verb is bimibatu. So you're probably wondering, why is that P there at all? Why is it highlighted? That's just like a little thing to keep in mind, and like I'm still trying to keep this in my head. Just like here, Dagoshin, we Tagoshin, Bungishin, Pongishin. Do you notice anything about these sounds? They're changing after what? The gi or the we? Here, I'll show you down here. The highlight. It refers to something called initial consonant change. It's not a big deal, but keep it in mind because you might start noticing it more often now. Some verbs beginning in certain letters experience a hardened sound following time senses gi and we, such that the following changes occur. So if you see the time tense we or gi in front of a verb starting with any of these letters, you'll hear these letters instead. So bungishin, gi pungishin. Gisina, gi kisina. Dagoshin, we tagoshin. Chichi, chi, j to ch, z to s, zh to sh. So that's what happens following these ones, and like it's consistent. It's always going to be that sound into those sounds down there, but that's why this might look a little bit different. So if you were to copy that, go to the dictionary would be like, what are you talking about? So you have to go recognize like, oh, the gi made this letter into p, so what turns into p? B does. So bimi batu, he or she runs, gi pimi batu sig. So how do we figure that out? Well, we know bimi batu is the verb and it ends in a double O, which is a long vowel. We know si means it's negative and it's clearly B form because there's nothing on the front. It's got that si. It's not C, it's si, shortened there. So we know it's B form. So we're going to go to our VAI paradigms. B form, negative, Gawing form. Long vowel endings because bimi batu. We're going to look for the one that ends in sig. C1, sig, right there. So that means gi, pimi batu, sig is he or she is not, when he or she is not. So this one would be, when, as, or if. So when she, gi is past tense, so we gotta make sure we note that when she did not run. So did is indicated by the gi. No, I put when there, as or if would have been fine. If she did not run, we could do that. If she did not run, that's also correct. Bimi batu sig, the G is what indicates she. And who was it doing it? Who is the pronoun? He or she. In Ojibwe, that is ween. And that's how that works. So follow that process in order to answer these questions, and then check yourself with the answer key part 2 down here. And then let me know if you do have any questions. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I think you noticed how much I geeked out about it. But yeah, so give it a try and practice with the transparent language lesson and try practicing writing out compound sentences on your own. I do that just kind of for fun. Ojibwe language is my life. I love it. So, there's probably people like, don't you have anything better to do other than sitting at home writing conjugations for fun? And I'm like, no, not really. I love it. I do have a life outside of work too. It's fun, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as much, or at least like enjoy it so that it isn't work. Enjoy it so that it is inspiring. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Talk to you soon.